Perfect. It looks like we've got some people starting to sign on already.
Excellent.
Which means it's time for me to remember that I am on a webcam.
Action.
Okay, I'm getting this all set up here.
Great.
The pressure of timing, you made it back from the gym on time and everything. We're ready to go. You're feeling free of any of those stress chemicals then?
Absolutely. You know, I was going to put it off, and I said, no, I've got to squeeze this in and make the time to do this, because everything else from there is just, the endorphins are pumping and everything is a lot easier then.
Isn't it amazing? And it's funny because we're going to talk about it on the webinar, how our anxiety of the future is so much worse than the future actually almost ever is. So we don't feel like we have enough time and we're rushing, but there 1 out of every 50 times that I go to the gym, I'm like, oh, maybe I was too tired today. The rest of the time I'm like, thank goodness I went. I feel so much better.
It puts everything else into perspective. It truly does.
It does. This brain of ours likes us to think that we have no time for anything, and we just don't have to always believe it.
It's true. Remember those days where you squeezed in 10 things and you lived to tell the story, and it all happens.
The next day happens. It just keeps coming toward us.
That's right. Everything was successful, and it's not so bad after all.
That's so true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good thing we are doing a webinar about the pressure of doing more with less.
I know. Our members are so excited.
Right on.
Yes. Yeah, they're so excited. I've just been getting so many emails about this. It's a very important topic for men and women.
Yeah.
And I was very excited that there are men and women on our webinar today as well.
I completely agree. And I think just that it's funny because I was putting an article together on something similar. And so if you Google how to do more with less, you get like 31 million hits in like 0.2 seconds. Like there is just, and it's one of those things, it's the, how do I do this? Yes, we know we have to do it. So then how do we do it, and what are the consequences of it? And there's very few people that I come across who say, no pressure. I'm fine. I've got it all under control. So whether it's in control or out of control, we're feeling that pressure. So I think it's something that resonates with people.
And I think it's not just men and women. It's across all generations too. It's not just a certain demographic or certain age group that has to deal with this. It's everyone. I mean, even teenagers. We look at high school children. I mean, it's across all areas.
Absolutely. We've got a family friend, and the kids are involved in so many things, and they actually asked me to talk to their younger teenage daughter. The amount of pressure she had on herself, making sure that she had all the extracurriculars going, and she's 14. And she's already preparing all of these things, but if I don't get in, what are, my life is over. And it's that, my gosh, that's, we've got the experience of knowing that there is something more than high school, but high school is hard enough. Being a teenager is hard enough without actually all that extra pressure of those future expectations. So yeah, there's no doubt that's increasing.
Absolutely.
And I think I'm seeing us get started here, so we have probably about 3 minutes before we get ourselves going, or about 2 minutes before we get ourselves going. Time pressure is another one that people always seem to feel, so we want to make sure we're honoring that time pressure and as additional people are getting in. For those of you are on mute, and as you are starting to sign in, I want to let you know that on the right-hand side you're going to be seeing panel. If you're having any technical issues, you're going to see a section with a little plus beside it that says questions or chat. If you hit that button, the plus button, you'll get a pull down screen for questions, and we've got our IHHP team in the background helping with some technical support, so don't hesitate to pop in there if you need to. You might be seeing Dawn and I's faces largely across your screen, and I would hope that that is not a bad view. However, I'm sure you want to be able to see the slides also. So if you go to where the you see our faces, if you play around in that section, you're going to be able to see, you can pull us off to the side so you get a nice clear view of the screens.
I see we still have quite this. Everyone is joining at rapid rates. They looked at the clock.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
Ah, I'm supposed to be on a webinar right now.
Well, it's interesting, even in, there was a little article, so Outlook, I guess Outlook still does collect some of our information, but they have looked at reminders from a calendar invite perspective, and so the standard reminder was 1 hour, 1 day before. Most people have changed their reminders to kind of like 2 minutes, 5 minutes custom before now. So we are in that, fitting everything in that very short amount of time. So we'll give about 1 more minute here, and then we can actually get ourselves started. And for those of you out there, if you see that you are just seeing my face, I'll be our facilitator as we go through the session today, and my name is Sarah. You might have just lost a face, and we are just making sure we manage bandwidth a little bit so that there's no challenges with screens freezing and all of that great stuff that comes with using technology. So for those of you just joining, we've got a 1 minute countdown, and we're going to get ourselves started. And it looks like I've got my partner in crime here back, Dawn. I think, Dawn,
I was talking to all of you, and I don't think you could hear me.
No, I couldn't. So I thought
pressure.
all of a sudden, I know, all of a sudden I was the lone face on the screen.
No pressure, no pressure. Are we ready to get started, Sarah?
I think we are, yeah, I think that this is a good, we've got a good group on the line, and let's not create any additional time pressure, so let's get started.
That sounds wonderful. Well, welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us today. The Pressure of Doing More with Less, partnership with Institute of Health and Human Potential, as well as Big Speak. WINiT, Women in Travel, is presenting this webinar to all of its members proudly. There has been much buzz, and we are very excited to get started.
Beautiful. Okay. That is me, who's not, my screen is not moving. There we go. Dawn, if you'll take us through a little introduction here, that would be wonderful.
Absolutely. So our partner speaker today is Sara Ross. That is her beautiful face that you see on your screen today. She is the Senior Consulting Partner, Research and Training at IHHP, Institute of Health and Human Potential. Thank you, Sara, for being with us, and thank you for presenting this incredible topic that we certainly all need to discuss.
Perfect.
Myself, your host today is Dawn Repoli, Director of Program Management for WINiT, Women in Travel. On technical support to help us behind the scenes is Diana Pierce, Marketing with IHHP. And our partner sponsor, as I mentioned earlier, is Big Speak, Motivational Speakers Bureau, for the world's leading business speakers. I can tell you that we just started this partnership a few months ago, and between IHHP and Big Speak, wonderful, wonderful partnership with WINiT. Thank you.
Absolutely. So I'm going to jump in here right now. We do have a lot of you on the line, so thank you so much for joining. With that, we still actually want to keep this as an interactive session. So you will see on the right-hand side, there's a panel that's come up in GoTo. There is both a question section and a chat section. So if you have any technical questions or questions that come up throughout this, between myself, Dawn, and Diana, who we've got in the background, we're going to be monitoring that so that we can address some of those as they come through. Again, as a reminder, if you have any technical issues, don't hesitate to reach out to Diana in the questions section, and I'll be asking you to do a little bit of work as we go through. So it might be a good idea to clear the desk, turn things off, and let's see if we can spend 1 hour together to help you figure out how to manage all of the pressure of doing more with less.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. So I wanted to be sure that we gave a quick overview of WINiT and who we are and why we are here and why we're giving this and providing this WINiT webinar to all of our WINiT members. WINiT is an organization of men and women. We have that conversation between men and women to make sure that we are looking at all perspectives. WINiT provides professional and educational development. Everything is directly related to our mission statement. We help to grow and advance women's careers through our programming, build and market personal brands, help our companies recruit, retain, and nurture the careers of women. We believe that when you help the individual woman, you are helping the company and thus improving our industries. And also, we partner with organizations such as Big Speak and IHHP and fortify and complement existing programs.
Beautiful.
And thank you.
Dawn, I was just going to jump in with one thing that I noticed. We've got such a great turnout here, and WINiT is such a wonderful membership-based organization to be a part of. There are still a couple of you who are signed on for this webinar, and it's a free webinar in this partnership that WINiT that we are offering to all of the members. So there are a couple of you who have not signed up for the membership yet, so we're going to show you that link, and when we're done the webinar, take a couple of minutes, sign up. It's free with a tremendous amount of value to its membership. So just a reminder, and I'll remind you at the end also.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
This brings us to, we wanted to make sure that we mentioned and offered this to all of our members. Again, this is a free program that we offer. This is our annual summit that is coming up in November in Dallas, Texas at the Renaissance Hotel. The November 11th is a Friday half-day educational session, which Sarah will be at presenting for us. We're very excited. And on November 12th is a full-day summit, and JP will be one of our keynote speakers from IHHP, one of the co-founders. So please be sure to go to our website, womenintravel.org, and sign up to go to our annual summit. We'd love to see you.
I am absolutely looking forward to this conference, and I thought it might actually be valuable because I know we've got some different people who are part of your membership that we actually already work with at IHHP, and then there's a number of you out there that we haven't worked with before. So really excited about doing this, and just to give people a little bit of context so they know all the different pieces of information that are coming today and that you're going to be getting an opportunity to experience at the conference, I thought I'd give you a very quick overview of what we do at IHHP and then let you know how the work we're doing today fits in with some of the different work I'll be presenting at the conference and that JP will be presenting as one of the keynotes at the conference. So just for those of you who don't know the Institute for Health and Human Potential, Dawn, thank you so much for saying our full name because it is a total tongue twister. So from here on in, I am only going to call it IHHP. And we are a leadership development training and research organization. So we do a lot of time, we spend a lot of time doing this specific type of work, and we tend to focus on the area of pressure and helping people perform and lead under pressure. And we do this very specifically because I think most of you that have actually signed up on this webinar have signed up because you would agree that when everything is going well, it is much easier to be a great leader in that environment. And yet the way our world is moving and the constant amount of change, we are feeling a tremendous amount of pressure. And it's not just perceived, it is real pressure asking and pulling on leaders to perform and lead differently. So that's where we actually spend our focus. And we do a number of different training programs. And the focus of those training programs is really looking at it from a brain science perspective. So we look at the brain as kind of our operating system, and if we can optimize that operating system, then we've got the capacity to use the best of our abilities even in our most pressure-filled situations. So just quickly, we've got 3 core programs that we offer, and it's all about optimizing that brain. So the first kind of area that we focus is on that emotional system, the emotional part of our brain, and our flagship foundational program is the Science of Emotional Intelligence. We're not really going to touch on any of this today in this session, but to Dawn's point, this is where I'm going to have an opportunity to spend half a day with a number of you in a workshop that we are going to look at some of the material from this program. The second program that we offer optimizes the thinking part of our brain, that cognitive system, the execution stuff. It's one thing to manage our emotions, but we still need to lead and perform. So the second program we offer is doing your best when it matters most. And what's really exciting about this program is it's based on our New York Times best-selling book that we launched last year, and the co-author of that is the co-founder of our organization that Dawn introduced, Dr. J.P. Paloufraye. So he will be doing one of the conferences on November 12th at the WINiT conference. And the last program that we offer is really that leadership communication-based program. When we are optimizing that emotional system and that cognitive thinking system, bringing those together is really where leaders need to perform, where we need to have those powerful, high-impact conversations, even in situations where we don't have a lot of time to do it. So there's a little bit of an overview of what we do. We do keynotes, assessments, training, and coaching on-site and virtual. So we'll offer our link at the end of this also, so if you're not able to join us at the conference, which I would hope to see all of you, there's still an opportunity to get some more information.
Great. And Sarah, we did have a question too.
Yes.
Someone was asking, will the deck for this presentation be available to our attendees?
Yes, I believe, Dawn, we're going to have it all set up, PDF. There's a couple of areas you'll see there's some builds, so we'll clean that up so it's nice to review, but we'll get that out to everybody as we finish up. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to jump right in because I think there is a number of you filled out our survey that we sent out before the webinar, and it was so helpful in allowing us to see where we needed to focus. So I thought I'd give you a little bit of a high level of what we saw in this survey that we sent out. So the first one, thank goodness, was not very surprising. I think that's why we have such a high number of attendees here. One of the questions we asked is, do you feel like you are being asked to do more with less in a year-over-year type of situation? And over 90% of you agreed or strongly agreed. I don't think this is surprising at all, and I think that this is why we're going to have some of these conversations today. So the second question was an interesting one, and we asked how easily we're able to ask for help when there is that pressure of doing more with less. And we had about 40% of people say that they could easily do this. So less than half feel that they can easily ask for help. And I think what's really interesting, and we're going to touch on this in our time together, when I looked at the comments associated with this, I could see a really clear correlation, because for most people, when they looked at how to delegate and ask for help, the biggest concern that they had is that the only people they had to go with were team members and colleagues who were also in the exact same environment, who were feeling this pressure. And how do you delegate and pull more from people who are already feeling maxed to their capacity? So I think we're going to have an opportunity to dig into that. This number was actually a little bit higher than I thought it would be, and higher than some of the other research that we've done before. From the people on this session today, 63% of you agreed or strongly agreed that work-life balance is a source of pressure. And the only reason I say that is a little bit surprising is, believe it or not, I've seen that number to be a little bit higher. So still over half of us say this is a pressure, so this is why we are going to address this as we go through. I loved this one. Almost 80% of people strongly felt that in those challenging situations, they were actually still able to stay connected to the big picture, to the mission of the work that they are attempting to do, the meaningful element of why they are doing what they are doing. And I think what's so powerful about this statistic is it gives us insight into why we are feeling so much pressure. Because if we were saying, no, we're not connected to it, then we wouldn't be worried about engagement, commitment, how effective and collaborative we actually are, how committed to our clients and the services that we offer. And this is our place to say, we're staying connected to it, so how do we actually fulfill the expectation to do the work that we know is most important? And the last one goes right in alignment with this. About 86% of you feel that the pressure that your organization is kind of has surrounding it is hurting engagement. And we know that when people are overwhelmed with stress, they start burning out and they start shutting down or they start leaving. So we're going to need to do more with less. How are we going to figure this out? So thank you for offering that. And I want to give a little bit of context to the goal of this workshop, because many of you asked a number of questions in the survey also. And here's what's clear. There is no doubt we are being asked to do more with less. There's no doubt that we need to execute more, coach more, and there are many instances that you shared with us where you still are being asked to do the same thing, but now you're being asked to do it with larger teams. Now you're being asked to do it with teams that are more dispersed, where you're dealing with digital transformations in environments that are constantly changing. So we really want to address this. But here's what's clear. We're going to spend a little bit less time on the tactical time management types of strategies. And instead, in our hour together, what we're going to do is focus more on creating a positive mindset management. Because here's the reality. If we don't manage that mindset under pressure, what is inevitably going to happen is we know there are a whole bunch of productivity tools out there available to us. But when we're stressed out and overwhelmed and feeling that pressure, we actually just layer on another layer of pressure by acknowledging and recognizing that we're not using those tools. So if we need to have the difficult conversations, if we need to say no and set boundaries to more work, if we need to negotiate and advocate for our teams, then we really need to be in the most positive mindset possible to help buffer and create some resilience in these high-pressure environments. So that's very specifically what we're going to do. Just to give you a little snapshot, how do we build that pressure resilience? And in order to do that, what we're going to do is actually give a very clear definition as to what pressure actually is. And there's three characteristics, because if we understand those characteristics, we can be a little bit more intentional into how we approach our pressure situations. And with that, we're also going to explore the difference between stress and pressure. And some of you may have seen the article that went out shortly before in the WINiT newsletter, giving you a little bit of a difference here. But this is going to be an important thing to help us recognize where are we going to put our time and energy. And finally, what we are going to do is, if we understand pressure and the three characteristics of pressure, let's see how sometimes we can distort our reality. We have what we're going to call cognitive distortions, mindset distortions that have pressure feeling even bigger than it might actually be. And if we're going to talk about those, and just to give you some insight, we're going to talk about how we sometimes magnify things. We get caught focusing on the uncontrollable, and we sometimes get stuck in the busy task trap when we're under pressure. We're going to also look at three strategies to address these mindset distortions that we fall into during pressure. Perfect. So Dawn, I know I still have got you there. I'm going to define pressure, but I'm going to put you on the spot in a moment to share with us what might be a pressure moment that you've experienced in the past little while, or that might be coming up. So before I do that, I thought I'd give everyone out there a little bit of a definition, because here's what our research shows, and JP during the keynote is really going to give you some more insights, but for the Performing Under Pressure book, the Doing Your Best New York Times best-selling book, we did a study with over 12,000 people over multiple years. And one of the key things that came out of that is this: not all moments are the same. They're not all created equally. They don't all have the same impact. And we're going to see that pressure moments actually have an outsized impact for three specific reasons. A pressure moment can be defined as a moment that is actually important. Okay, so there's some real oomph behind it. The outcome of that pressure moment is uncertain. We're not sure exactly how it is going to all unfold. And I think the part that makes pressure so challenging for us is, in our pressure moments, we are responsible for or being judged by that outcome. So it makes it very difficult. So here's what I'm going to ask all of you to do. I'm going to get you to start using your keyboard, and in the chat section, it'll be on the right-hand side, you'll see chat, pull down menu. I'd like you to share with us, if you don't mind, some of the pressure moments or situations that you're currently facing. Either you've just faced recently or you may have coming up. And as people take their time, figure out the system and write an answer, Dawn, I'm wondering if I could pull you into the conversation and see, is there any pressure moments you've experienced lately?
Hi, Sarah. Yes. So my most recent, of course, I think that we can all speak to this, and something comes to mind immediately. And as you were talking, the biggest thing that came to mind for me was presentation to our board of directors. As a nonprofit organization, when you look at our financial summary and revised projected budget that I had to present to them, and this was new territory for me.
Right.
Certainly not the accounting piece of it, but to actually present it. And to, I think the biggest pressure for me was trying to figure out all the questions they were going to ask me ahead of time and make sure I was completely prepared for every scenario and every question. And it was highly stressful. It was highly stressful.
And it's interesting because when I'm just even starting to go through, it's important. There's no doubt about it. That's why everybody is helping you see how important it is. And even if they ask every question, there's a chance that there's a question that you won't have the perfect answer for. So there's some uncertainty that's there. Right. And there's a lot of responsibility sitting on you. I'm seeing that even, and I think you probably see the same over and over again. I'm seeing things about presentations. I'm seeing things about financial pressures. I'm seeing things right here around meeting quotas. For those of you that are especially that are out in sales, there's this kind of quarterly thing that's always happening, year-end numbers that people are working on, balancing all the true home pressures that are there, having family that need us and also having teams that need us. Lots of tensions and being pulled there. I'm seeing, is there anything else that's popping up here?
Renewing contracts, that's an interesting.
Yeah.
Renewing contracts, yes.
Yeah, and we hear, I mean, huge amount of uncertainty, especially if it's a contract, a client that's a major client or a major contract we've had. There's a ton of uncertainty there. There's a lot of judgment there. Can we hold on to the client? What happens if we don't? So we've got some real stuff that we are working on here from the comments that we are seeing. So here's what I'm going to keep us doing. I'm going to keep us moving forward so that we can start to see how do we actually manage these pressure situations. And I think it's important for us to do a quick definition and distinction between stress and pressure. Often that's a question that we get. It's like, well, is this a pressure situation or is this a stressful situation? So if we were just to put a very basic kind of definition around stress, we can think of stress as when we feel overwhelmed by the demands that are actually being put on us. So we feel stretched beyond our capacity, too many things coming at us in a short amount of time or without enough resources. And this is a huge contributor to that pressure of doing more with less. But there's a distinction between stress and pressure, because pressure really is about when we have to produce a very specific result that is going to have a material impact on my pressure, on my success. So stress is, yes, there's a lot going on and it might feel like a lot of things are important, but maybe there's not that many people actually paying attention to it. Or we're putting a lot of emphasis on it from a stressful perspective, but in the big picture, it's not all things are incredibly important. And I think this is really kind of a nice way to think about it. Pressure moments are really those stressful moments that matter. And this isn't just semantics. It actually matters because if we misidentify stress and pressure, we act out of proportion to what the environment is actually calling for us. So we start to use a whole bunch of mental and emotional resources and capabilities for moments that don't actually need it. And we kind of we kind of run out of those for those really important and most critical pressure moments, and we end up focusing on the wrong things. So there's no doubt that when we open up the email and there's so many different requests and we're in back-to-back meetings, it's incredibly important, and we're thinking about the dinner that we have with friends on the weekend, and we still have 2 cities we have to get to before we can get home to prepare for that dinner. There is no doubt a lot of stress there. But if we don't make the distinction between those stressful moments and our pressure moment, because what if that following Monday we're interviewing for that role that we really want within the organization, or we are sitting down to negotiate the renewal of that contract? We need our resources. We need our best abilities for those pressure situations. So being able to identify what's stress and what's pressure will help us make the distinction and the decision of where am I going to put my time and energy, and where do I need to hold some of that back for those really important moments. Because at the end of the day, it would be wonderful if our time and energy was endless and infinite, but it's not. And I think that's why we feel this pressure around doing more with less. So I wanted to just jump in here very quickly, because we're going to do a little bit of brain science here. I'm going to do a lot more brain science in the pre-conference workshop that I'm going to have an opportunity to do in November. And then JP in the keynote of Doing Your Best is going to talk a little bit more. But when we think about our brain, we know we've got this emotional system, we'll call it our limbic system, and our cognitive thinking system. And when it comes to managing stress and pressure, that thinking system, we can kind of imagine this part right here at the front, our prefrontal cortex. That's the part of our brain that allows us to be effective and execute in our high pressure situations. It allows us to make good decisions and strategize and prioritize. This is that part of the brain that actually keeps us connected to the big picture. So very important. We want it working really well. And then there's that emotional system, that limbic system. And what's interesting here is that a component of that limbic system is the hippocampus. And that's the part of our brain that helps us to learn, and it stores memories. And so when we are under pressure, cortisol, and I imagine many of us have heard of cortisol. JP and myself will both spend more time talking about cortisol in our sessions, but cortisol is a stress chemical that floods our system to help us deal short-term in the moment with some of these pressure situations. The problem is it's not meant to be in our system all of the time. And yet the environment that most of us are working in is creating spaces where we have a whole bunch of cortisol flooding our system almost continuously. And there's a consequence to this, because the consequence is simply this: when we are carrying too much cortisol for too long, there's been some phenomenal research done. Neuroscience out of the Yale Stress Center named Emily Ansell has done some very cool work. She wanted to see with some of her colleagues what happens to the brain under continuous pressure. And what they found was that under continuous pressure, high levels of cortisol, it actually impacts the brain. It creates an environment where the brain shrinks, that prefrontal cortex. We actually see shrinkage in that part of the area, making it less effective. We have less neurons actually firing off, so we become less effective at making decisions. We become less effective and less able to be strategic. One area that gets impacted. The other area that gets impacted is this hippocampus. And so the hippocampus, being responsible for learning and being responsible for memories, what ends up happening under pressure, chronic pressure, is we start losing some of that short-term memory. And I can guarantee there's people out there who know that this has happened to them before, and we start losing our ability to learn as effectively. So it's an important thing that we start paying attention to. Doing more with less isn't just something that we are dealing with. If we don't actually figure out how to buffer that a bit, if we don't manage this brain here, manage our mindset, because believe it or not, how we think about pressure has an impact on how detrimental pressure is to our brain. So if we manage that mindset a little bit more effectively, we can buffer against some of these things that happen with too much pressure, too much to do, and not enough time. And I'll kick in. I'm sure there's times where you've felt the pressure, and I think we were having a conversation. I've just gotten back from a vacation, and every single time I get back from vacation, I write myself a little note to say I need to take more vacations, because something that was taking me days, oh, I will not even lie, not days, weeks to get done. I'd start working longer hours, I'd stay up later, and I still wasn't getting it done. Truthfully, I got it done in about 2 days when I got back after about 10 days on vacation. It was phenomenal, the difference.
Agree.
Yeah.
I agree,
yeah.
Sarah. And for me, it's even stepping away from the computer and going for, if it's on my lunch, going for a 20-minute walk.
Yeah.
Get outside, do something that is different, and some of my best ideas and solutions to those problems are when I step away from the pressure.
Yeah.
And it truly does make that difference. And it doesn't have to be something overwhelming and huge.
Yeah.
It can be something for 10 to 20 minutes in your life.
And that's the thing, our brain needs breaks. What's, adding on to that, Dawn, what's interesting is those small breaks. We're looking for tactical things to deal with this. Taking a break, taking some deep breaths is just one of the things that is just so important for us. Taking a longer break, a vacation, what her team, Emily Ansell's team, also found is that following a vacation, that atrophied hippocampus, that shrinking of the brain, actually starts to go back to its original size. So it's not like this has to be this way, but we actually have to create some space to disconnect in order for our brain to function as effectively as possible. So let's jump into some of, if we know those 3 characteristics of pressure, it's important, the outcome's uncertain, and we're being judged by that outcome. There's a responsibility to us for that outcome. So if we've got when we've got managers and leaders on this call right now, the pressure immediately increases because we are responsible for a whole bunch of work that we're not actually doing. So let's see some of the distortions that we put in place on those 3 characteristics that actually get in the way of this positive mindset that we are actually trying to develop. So the first one has to do with importance, and I am guessing that everyone out there has done this at least once. When we are under pressure, we start to hyper magnify the importance of that situation. It becomes this all or nothing type of thing. When we focus on the things around control, we know there's uncertainty, and what happens is we end up focusing far too much on the things that we can't control. We give a tremendous amount of time and energy to that. And then the last one is when we know we're in a situation where we're being judged by the outcome, we can get hyper self-critical, but what else happens is our brain is wired to then get hyper focused on the tactical things, on the results, and we actually start disconnecting from the relationships, the people that we actually need in order to help buffer some of this pressure. It happens so easily. Dawn, I'm going to pull you in and laugh a little bit because as we were preparing for this webinar, I started to worry about all the things I couldn't control. Outside the window, none of you can see, but we've got some clouds rolling in, and I was like, how am I going to control the weather? What if there's a thunderstorm and we get knocked off? So probably not a good idea for me to focus on the weather, because I think I'm capable of a lot of things. Controlling the weather is not going to be one of them.
Right. And Sarah, it brings a nice point to some of the questions that we are getting and some of the comments that we are getting is about that presentation. When we look at the, hyper magnify the importance, and it is, the presenting in front of the CEO and those things. Of course, the importance is very high.
Totally.
But I think it's really putting everything into perspective. You've done your homework. You've done your best with preparing that. And also going to the point of a lot of our folks on the call are talking about when they have new information put in front of them, where they have to learn something new, and and have an outcome with that new information. And again, that is something that's out of your control. And again, the time management and learning something new and being able to present on that. Brings to some really good points. And I always, for myself, I always think there's a 4 agreements, and 2 of the 4 agreements is never make assumptions and don't take it personally. And I think that truly puts into perspective all of these distortions, that you really have to really look at this from a very generic point of view, which of course is very hard at times. It's very hard to do at times, but
you know, we could have a multi-hour webinar just on, you know, how personally we can sometimes take things, because I think, you know, and there's this fine balance, to your point, of wanting to be committed, and we see people in the survey, they responded to I'm pretty effectively staying connected to the mission, to the goals, to the big picture. I feel, and I read so many comments of, I'm really passionate about what we do, I'm really passionate about developing people, I really want to give people the opportunity to get creative, to be innovative. We want to make differences for people. And so when you're feeling really passionate about that, and you're feeling this pressure that may not allow you to do that, I mean, as soon as we add in time pressure, that has such a distorting impact, no matter what. We don't have a lot of time to, we're dealing with it as the overall context, but time pressure is huge. And so when we're trying to learn something new and coach other people, it's hard. When we are taking on new structures where we don't even have all the answers, we may not like what is actually going on with some of those changes, and yet we still need to support people through that. I would be remiss if I tried to act like that wasn't hugely important. But here's the thing. If we don't manage that mindset, if we, to your point, if we distort the importance and we hyper magnify it, then we are just setting ourselves up to be less effective. Because pressure doesn't make us better. Some pressure, some stress, don't get me wrong, it gets us focused, but past that kind of line of, okay, I at least have enough resources to do what I need to do, when we start to feel too stretched, we are not perfect and at our very best in those situations. So what do we do to help us get closer to that capability? That, I think, is the real key.
Right. I think it's a self-awareness too, Sarah, where you really take a look at how you do react and feel where you feel those pressures and where you feel that your distortion is. When you look at these 3 bullet points, where is your distortion in that? There's a fine line between doing your absolute best and having an expectation for yourself that is just, you know, perhaps unrealistic and adding to those distortions.
That you're suddenly going to be better than you've ever been, and you'll be absolutely perfect. You know what I mean? Like, so is that realistic? Like, all of a sudden I'm going to grow a cape and become Superwoman who can fly. Well, no, I've never been able to do that before, but that is what these distortions do. And you hit something so key, and that's self-awareness. And I have no doubt that every single person on the line right now, you know, we hear self-awareness and we're like, yes, I know self-awareness is important, but if we're not aware of where we're making these distortions, then we're just falling into the trap of those distortions, right? So this awareness is so critical. So for those of you out there, I see answers flooding in around where some of these distortions happen for you. It's really interesting, and I'll ask you to keep sharing those, because we're going to break each of these out individually and look at some strategies to each. But it's funny, because if you start to track over time those pressure situations and even start to make that distinguishing feature of what's stress and what's pressure. Stress is something that we can hyper magnify, like it's a pressure situation, like everything's on the line, when it's not really. And you might see that you fall into one of these more regularly than some of the others. I don't get too caught up in things I can't control until I'm on a webinar, but that magnification and then getting really focused on the results and sometimes disconnecting from the people, those are two areas I've got to be really careful of under pressure for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So let's break these out. I know everyone's like, oh my gosh, so I'm distorting things. Now what do I actually do about it? We will not leave you hanging. Let's have a look at that now. And if you can keep sharing some of those experiences where you're distorting some of these, we can use them as examples, and we'll start to look at what are some strategies we can put in place. So let's look at distortion number 1. When we know a pressure moment or situation is important, we don't want, Dawn, to your point, we don't want to disregard the importance. Let's not hyper-magnify it, because when we start to appraise a situation as being so important, the most important moment, we just increase that pressure. We increase that cortisol in our system. That makes it harder for us to use this prefrontal cortex, makes it harder for us to access and pull on all of that information that we've learned and some of those successes that we've actually learned in the past. So there's a couple of really key things. This is where, you know, our brain, especially that limbic system, it loves to make mountains out of molehills. So everything looks like an urgent, important situation. And there's a couple things we do really naturally. We'll probably see our teams doing this, our people doing this, our families doing this, and there's no doubt we do it. We get into that everything is urgent and important type of thinking. That all or nothing, and this is my one shot. This is a chance of a lifetime. I've got to present perfectly to that board, because if not, it's all over. And how helpful are these, you know, even as you read these, Dawn, if that's the thinking that you're going in as you have to go and do your presentation, if you're like all or nothing, now or never, gotta nail it and be absolutely perfect, this is my one shot, how successful are you setting yourself up to be in that situation?
Right. And often I think it paralyzes you.
Oh,
it paralyzes
sure.
you. You may be so ready for something and spot on everything that you are presenting, the contract, the negotiation, all of those things, but you don't want to be your own worst enemy. You don't want to paralyze yourself.
I think you've just hit it right, and that's what over-magnification does. And in the book it talks a lot about this. We become mentally rigid. We're less flexible. We literally forget things. Our brain freezes up, but we get that lockup, that paralyzation, and it's so frustrating. So if we're going to think of a strategy to this, it's going to seem so straightforward, but if we aren't aware that we're magnifying something, then it becomes very important for us to actually play down the importance. And if we can under-exaggerate things and kind of, yes, this is a great opportunity, but it's an opportunity. So people might be making a judgment, that contract might be huge, but chances are it's not going to be the only contract of your entire life. You want to be on, but to your point, Dawn, you don't want to actually paralyze yourself. And getting that perspective is really what we're trying to do. One of the strategies that I offer to everyone out here, and a woman named Sue Kraut-Kramer, who's one of our facilitators at IHHP, offered this to me, and I will tell you, it is a strategy that I personally work with on almost a daily basis, but I share it with any of the clients that we work with, and we call it the rule of sixes. And I'm sure people have different variations of this, but it's an incredibly powerful kind of stopgap for us to stop and say, okay, this is an important situation, but let's put it into perspective. Is this going to matter in 6 years from now? Is this going to matter in 6 months from now, in 6 weeks from now, days, hours, minutes, or seconds? And this really is a valuable tool, especially when we're making that distinction between stress and pressure, because I think that there's times that it's important. It might matter in 6 weeks, but we act like this is going to matter in 6 years from now. And then some of those things that aren't going to matter in 6 minutes, we're still giving it a tremendous amount of our time and energy. And this is just a way for us to pull back in some perspective. How important is this? So that's one thing that we can do. it also helps us stay connected to what's really most important in that situation. So I want, for some of you, I could see that magnification was a big one for you. So I want you to just kind of start sharing with us. It's also priming your brain to remember some of this information. What are some different ways you have or you could help minimize some of the importance in those pressure situations? Because I think for probably almost every single example we saw, there's probably a way of keeping the importance in perspective. And Dawn, if you wouldn't mind keeping an eye on that for me, just as people are starting to write some answers in, I wanted to share a very quick story. So many of you, if you haven't been able to tell from the way I say organization, I am a Canadian. I know that we have some Canadian people on the line. We have a lot of US people on the line, and you're all muted, so nobody got to ask me, are you a Canadian? But I give you that context because in the book we share a story about a woman that JP interviewed who is on the TV show Shark Tank. And so for most of you, you know what Shark Tank is. It is where, you know, a small business owner or an entrepreneur goes and pitches their idea to a number of investors. And the investors kind of put them on the spot, high pressure, makes them justify their business case, and then decides, are we going to give you money to help out or not? It actually was built off of the Canadian show, Dragon's Den. So that was the original one. And I give that context because I have a cousin who is just a phenomenal entrepreneur. Her and her partner have built these hockey pants for kids that make kids safer playing hockey, but it also makes it so much easier and quicker for them to get their equipment on. And if we have any parents out there who help their kids in sports, getting our kids ready for sports is sometimes the most time-consuming thing. But it's a phenomenal product, and she just had an opportunity to be on Dragon's Den. And so the weekend before she was on Dragon's Den, I was with her, and I probably added to the pressure as I'm standing here thinking about it, but I was like, that's amazing. What an amazing opportunity. Can you imagine? This will just change everything, Emily, if you get this, if you get the Dragon's Den's buy-in. And she did something so powerful. And she's young, and I learn from her all of the time, which is why I think she'll be awesome. She said, it is a very cool opportunity. And we have a couple of different opportunities. I hope it works out. It could be really great, and if it doesn't, that's okay. And it's just a little thing, but she's going to be on TV defending a product that they have put their time and energy into that could change her entire business. And she didn't see it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, which I think I probably would. She didn't see it as an all or nothing. She saw it as, this is an opportunity, and it won't be the only opportunity I ever experience in my life. And I thought, my gosh, woman, you are amazing. I can't wait to watch her on Dragon's Den.
That's wonderful. That does put it in perspective. And some of our members are saying, Kathy commented, ask yourself, what is the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
And Jan said, be prepared and take deep breaths. You know, something as simple, and if you actually kept that in the forefront of your mind when you were doing these things, and Natalie had to say, prioritizing tasks by true urgency.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So you're going to downplay some of the things that are not as urgent, right?
Yeah.
And then Julie said, be comfortable in my preparation.
Yeah.
That is interesting to me. Yeah. Be comfortable in the preparation, not the presentation.
Yeah.
The preparation.
I love that, especially when it comes to presentations. Sometimes the hardest part is actually the practicing and the preparing for things. I think I immediately felt grounded when you shared that, Dawn. So I need to add that to my list of things I want to use. Thank you. And the one about the urgency of task, I mean, there's the importance piece playing in. You're going to see each of these distortions can feed into one another. So we're going to see that on the task distortion also. Beautiful. Thank you. So let's talk about the second one, and we'll spend a little less time on this because I think it's one we know, but I want us to reconnect to it. the distortion number 2 is tied to the uncertainty of those pressure situations, and it's where we get caught focusing on the things that we can't control. And the reality is, when we focus on the things that we can't control, it just creates emotions of anxiety, and it distracts us from the things that we need to be focused on. It really doesn't do anything to help us whatsoever. And for whatever reason, I've already shared it, I think that this is one I work on pretty well. And the thing that always throws me off is technology, because there's so many things that feel like they could go wrong. So if we have anybody out there in the IT world, I will never be joining you. Way too much pressure for me. You keep that. But we try to over control things sometimes, and then it keeps us from delegating and trusting and doing that. That's another way where we kind of decrease that uncertainty and just get stuck. So when we think about the strategy here, it's so simple, and yet it is hard to do. Can we refocus? Can we let go of the things that we can't control? Can we acknowledge that, you know what, a thunderstorm might happen? It might. I might get knocked off of this, but we've got a backup plan in case that actually happened. I can't control it, and if I worry about the weather the entire time, I forget that I've got the opportunity to interact with everyone here. And this is where I need to be putting my focus. The pressure situations are where you need to be putting your focus. So how do we kind of make sure that we don't get caught up? And I'm sure many of you have heard this before, but I even with any of the coaching clients I have the opportunity to work with, I can't tell you how many times we literally go through and let's make a list of the things we can't control. Our brain likes to know things have been acknowledged. So what sometimes happens is we think about, okay, I can't think about all the things I can't control, but they just keep going and going and going in our brain. And I'm sure there's people out there who have woken up in the middle of the night and your brain's going like this, or we have a hard time falling asleep. One of the key things we can do is just list those out. And take that list and say, I have to put that off to the side, because then make the second list of what are the things that we actually can control.
Yeah,
that's the area.
Right, Sarah, to your point, I've actually written them down on separate papers and torn them up and throw them away. I just tear it up and I throw it away and I say, that's it. This is not what I need to be thinking about. Something very interesting, Demea wrote in as far as the things you can't control, travel days to conferences, not being able to control the airlines. So there again, right? You have this high stress of, if I don't make it to this conference on time, it's going to look bad for me.
Yeah.
Right? So take that whole taking it personally, and yet it's something completely out of your control, and you have to let go of that, which is hard.
I'm laughing because what if you're speaking at the conference and you're late? I've had that situation, but you're so, I mean, I spend a tremendous amount of time in airports, and the amount of time and energy people put out on things that are so absolutely out of their control. It's no wonder they're absolutely exhausted when they arrive where they need to be. So you're right, you can't control airline. There's so many things we can't control, and I love, if we piggyback off of what we also heard earlier in some of the comments, can we kind of stop and take a breath in where we are, and quite literally as we exhale, release the things that we can't control. I'll add this one last little piece on here. The element of uncertainty also creates an environment where we feel like we don't have control. And so a lot of the comments that I read from the pre-survey were people saying, I want to do this, I should do this, I have to do all of these things, but, and there's a lot of research, and I won't get right into it, but how we use language has a tremendous impact on our mindset. So even to stop, and if we're prioritizing those tasks, we're looking at those situations that we can control, even changing our language from that I should, I have to, and saying, here's where I'm choosing to put my focus. This is the conversation I'm choosing to have. Even helps give some certainty back to our brain, because it does not love uncertainty. So there's a couple of different ways: making some lists, focusing on what we can control, letting go of what we can't, and then use our language and our focus to say, here's where I choose to put my time and energy and my focus. So a couple of little things right there. The other piece, I mean, and it comes to the asking help and delegating, is there places that, because there is a lot of uncertainty, because it's important, because I'm feeling judged, for some of it, it's challenging to actually let go of some of that control. And perhaps sometimes there is that simple check-in of, is there things that I need to loosen my control over? Acknowledge that there is going to be some uncertainty, but delegate back out. Just reminders, things we know, but under pressure we forget about and get caught up in these distortions. So let's talk about the last one here, and this is the distortion of the task trap. And we're going to talk about a little bit of this, and this is where, when we're under pressure to do more with less, our brain actually is, the way it's wired, it's designed, is to get very focused on task. And in fact, we see everything as important, which means we often focus on the less critical priorities. And this happens to us because and Dawn, I'm gonna ask you. I don't know if you do this. I have been guilty of this. Have you ever made a list of things that you need to get done? Have you ever done that before?
I have, every day.
Totally. Right? It's how we pay attention. Have you ever gone? How do you feel when you check things off?
Oh, it's incredible.
Isn't it great? Have you ever had a situation where you have already done something, but you add it to its list just to cross it off or check it off?
You know, Sarah, I have never done that, but
oh
I think
my gosh, then I'm embarrassed. So I have. I am being honest. I have done that before, and it's so. Oh, darn it, Dawn. I thought I'd have you in my corner.
I'm so sorry, but I might start.
That's fair. Some of you out there are thinking that I'm crazy, and some of you are laughing right now because you absolutely have done it before. And it's interesting because when our brain is feeling overwhelmed, it will sometimes look for some of those small wins. So that we get this kind of dopamine reward chemical reaction in our brain when we can check things off, when we can say that we have actually gotten something done. And so perhaps my brain needs a little bit more dopamine, and that's how it does. So there's a couple things we fall into in this task trap. We get caught in some of those non-critical things, and we start mistaking busy work for creative good work. And they are not the same. Teresa Mobile, she's a professor out of Harvard, has done a tremendous amount of research on time pressure. And so people feel like they are better. They feel they're performing better. They feel like they're more creative under pressure, especially that time pressure. But what everything shows is that they're actually not. And so work is getting done, but it is far less innovative, creative, and good prioritized work that's actually getting done. The second one is right here, we end up focusing on things that are less important. This is where we can sometimes get caught in the weeds. And what's really interesting is that as pressure goes up, cortisol goes up in our system. And so we get hyper-focused on results and tasks, which means we start decreasing our ability to empathize and connect with some of the relationships and the people that are really important to us. And this is, again, something that we are so susceptible to, especially under that time pressure. So as we're getting close to the end here, I think it's important that if we know that we can fall into this task trap, then the last strategy is, how do we counterbalance that? How do we kind of shift the focus from not just the results and the work we need to get done, but also focus on the relationships that are really important? And sometimes, Dawn, you said this right at the beginning at lunchtime, just stepping away from your desk. Sometimes it is, even when we feel like we don't have any time, how do we prioritize up and say, I actually need a chunk of time to step back and connect back to the bigger picture? Where am I spinning my wheels? Where am I getting focused on the busy work versus the most important, meaningful work? Where are there opportunities to build relationships, utilize others, people's strategies and strengths that we might be missing in that moment? So even just starting to connect to people, connection is a huge buffer to pressure for us. And unfortunately, when we are under pressure we sometimes almost start disconnecting from people because we're so focused on getting the work done. So even start asking yourself some questions, and for the team you're working with, the people you're working with, how can you create some connections with them? What do they need in the moment? How much pressure are they under? Can you connect with what they're actually doing well? And is there an opportunity to actually use them and delegate to them? And I think the last piece of this is feeling judged in a situation sometimes makes it hard for us to actually step back and ask for that help. And I saw that again and again in the comment section of this pre-survey where people said, how do I say no? How do I push back? How do I express to the top of the house that people are pushed to their capacity because it makes me look weak? It looks like I'm not committed and I'm not dedicated. And that's a really hard challenge for us to actually deal with. So I'm going to ask, just in our last couple minutes here, I want you to start to think about kind of the things that we've talked about. Is there some of these strategies that you could actually use to not only help create a positive pressure mindset for yourself, but are there other things that you might be able to do based on this distortions that we learned today and the 3 characteristics of pressure that might help the people you work with manage their positive pressure mindset also? Because here's what our research also does show. Inadvertently, with good intentions, by accident, when we as leaders are under pressure, we sometimes create environments of high pressure for the people that we work with. So just as we close off here, I'll leave you thinking about what are some of the things that we can do, and are there places we might inadvertently be creating and adding to this culture of pressure. So in close-up, because I want to honor the time and make sure we get everybody out of here, I want Dawn for us just to see any last questions and comments so we can add some of the best practices and things that people are doing here. But here's what I would love to challenge the people out there to think about. Over the next couple of weeks, help build some of your awareness to what mindset you are actually defaulting into. Make a list, track some of those thoughts that are coming up. Are we mistaking stress for pressure? Are there certain cognitive distortions that are starting? Are we magnifying things? Are we getting caught up on the uncontrollable? Are we so worried about being judged that we're not asking for help and finding ourselves getting caught up in the unimportant task traps versus the big priorities and balancing task and relationship? And see if there's a strategy you can start to put into place. And at the end of the day, we need to have some kind of reminder, because we are still going to be in an environment where we have to do more with less. And we are going to have those difficult conversations. So can you create some kind of a reminder to keep you connected to how do you want to show up to role model this positive pressure mindset for your team? And the last thought I'll leave you with is, just because you think something, remember, it doesn't mean that you actually have to act on it, respond to it, or believe it. Under pressure, our brain likes to trick us into thinking a lot of things that don't actually help us. But hopefully, with some of these strategies, we can create a little bit more of a buffer to the environment that we're working in. So Dawn, I think we're at the very top of the hour here. I know we're going to need to start losing some people. I want to make sure that we leave a little bit of space for those of you that might have questions. Dawn, if there's some things that you're seeing also in the comment sections from anybody, I'm happy to stay on and address some of those questions, and for us to just debrief out some of the things that might be in the question or chat section.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to Big Speak and IHHP, and WINiT is very proud and thrilled to be able to offer this to our members. I thank you. It's been incredibly helpful for me, for sure. And I'm just reading one of the comments. Very helpful. I see the traps I am falling into. That is from Rose, and she says thank you. To your point, I do set a timer for myself for every day at 12 o'clock to make me stop and pause. Maybe some of the members would find that to be helpful as well. Stop and pause and look at some of the traps that you're falling into during your day.
That's great. I mean, there are so many tactical things to do, and at the conference we're going to hit on some more of these. But as we said, we're going to get these slide decks available to all members. So my last reminder, Dawn, if you don't mind, I'm going to remind people you're going to see the link right here at the bottom for WINiT, Women in Travel. If you haven't signed up to be a member, please sign up, and that way you have access to the slide deck and all of the tremendous value that WINiT offers in their membership. And Dawn, thank you. Thank you for looking to us, connecting the needs of your membership with the offerings that we have around pressure. I have thoroughly enjoyed working with you, and I look forward to seeing you at the conference in November.
Thank you, Sarah. We greatly appreciate it. This is wonderful. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. And with that, we'll let people start signing off. And unless just double checking, Dawn, I can stay on for another couple of minutes if there's any questions.
I am looking now. There are not just a lot of incredibly powerful, great presentation, very helpful. Thank you. This was a great webinar. Just some really great positive commentary on the webinar. No questions.
So, I'll say this, I know one of the things that we can do is download all of the different comments and questions. So perhaps, Dawn, let's work together so some of the practices, best practices and comments people are making, they'll be without any names, but maybe we can share some of the strategies people have shared in this section and share it out with membership.
That would be wonderful. I agree, and actually some people are asking that if they were able to see the comments and answers. So that's a great idea.
Great, thank you. And just to let people know, there's some more tactical strategies of how to do some of these different things on the IHHP website also, which is just very simply www.ihhp.com. And between all of the different resources you have available, I wish everyone a positive pressure environment to be working in. And thank you.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay. I will start to sign off then.